I like talking about ideas as opposed to people. I love the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, "Small minds talk about people, mediocre minds talk about events, great minds talk about ideas." So let's talk about the idea of a Tesla car. That is actually an innovation of old technologies. Uh, you know, yeah, the lithium-ion batteries are better than the lead acid or what have you, but you basically have a battery being plugged in to a coal-fired power grid. An actual Tesla, like Nikola Tesla had, that J.P. Morgan famously turned to Tesla and said, "We can't put a meter on it; it's not going to come out." These are big industrialists back then. I call a Tesla actually a Musk, because what Elon Musk has is an innovation of an old technology where you plug in a car to a grid. Now, what's the grid? The electric grid. Most people don't know this. It's being run mostly off fossil fuels. Very small percentage of power comes from renewables. So it feels good. So, that whole paradigm needs to change where we say, where are the big breakthroughs that need to happen? And those have not happened yet because they've been suppressed for alleged national security reasons. But in reality, it's because the national security state is being run by people with big vested industrial powers. The industrial fascists, just like in the 1800s, early 20th century, that same mindset is running the current economy, the current paradigm of technology. So I think if you look at something like SpaceX, it's using just a more refined version of what Werner von Braun invented for Adolf Hitler in World War II, called a rocket. You burn something called a propulsion, shoots it up like a Roman candle. It's not an invention. It's not a breakthrough. So all of those technologies look cool because they're repackaged with maybe some computerized systems. But the fundamental energy and propulsion system that's running the system is very old and really isn't going to fix the environmental crisis, or more importantly, or equally importantly, the macroeconomic crisis, where you have 48% of the world's population doesn't have indoor plumbing yet. So the extreme poverty leads to revolutions and violence and radicalism and extremism. All of that and the biosphere collapse isn't going to be fixed by a plug-in electric car. So now I think people like Elon Musk certainly know of these other technologies, but they also know that there have been very fierce and rather nasty things done to people who try to bring them out, up to and including killing them if necessary. I mean, it's suspected that Stan Meyer, who had a car that ran on water using a type of electrolysis, was killed. In fact, right before he collapsed, he said, "I've been poisoned," and collapsed.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
He has developed what's called a water fuel cell. It has taken the place of his old gas tank. The water fuel cell breaks down water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is used to run his dune buggy.
I don't care if you use rainwater, well water, city water, ocean water. If you don't have any fresh water, go ahead and use snow. If you don't have any snow available to you, they use salt water because there's no adverse effect to the fuel cell.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Meyer's invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run army tanks. Myers is currently perfecting a water fuel cell for cars. It will cost about $1,500. He says it won't need any maintenance, and you won't have to replace it.
And he had other technologies that already had national security orders on. My group was going to acquire them. It's a very interesting story. He had a toroid, it looked like a donut, that had a national security order on it from the 80s that would run your house. My science advisor and team went to go see this after his heirs made it available for a group to buy. We, at that time, didn't have the resources to get it. An engineering group got it. They were all subsequently assassinated, all of them, except one. One survived. That was up in Michigan. So people don't realize the kind of things that will be done to maintain the hegemony over a fossil fuel based or nuclear power based and utility based centralized energy generation system that benefits a very small elite. And we're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars. If you add up the value of all the oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities, etc., it's hundreds of trillions of dollars conservatively. And for that, you run into a big buzzsaw. So I think people, a lot of these industrialists that I've met, or people who are, quote, high tech, I say there is no high tech out there. Our civilization has no high technology yet, except in a classified project. The things that are the fundamental energy and power sources that would run a planet properly. So we're a level 1 civilization, peaceful, not destroying the environment. Those have been viciously suppressed for 100 years. And so I've often called this the lost century, where there's an entire century of lost evolution, technology, social development, economic development, et cetera, and so on, because of these big, corrupt, fascist industrial interests. And it was like that in the late 1800s, early 20th century, the time of Nikola Tesla, and it's true of that today. That dynamic has not changed. And that's what we have to make. That's the big change that has to happen. One of the big changes. It's one of the big ones. And that's why we have to do that. Now, Elon Musk had a partner who co-founded PayPal with him, named Peter Thiel. And he wrote a book, From Zero to One, where he talks about this and mentions, I think in the book, he talks about that in 1964, you could fly from JFK to Paris in the same amount of time on a jet as you do now. So how is it from 1945 to now, there's nothing? The minds of humanity have come up with nothing? Think about it. Everyone stop for a minute and meditate on that for 1 second. That's just not possible. So this is why a very mainstream group called the Federation of American Scientists put out a research paper in 2010 that said there were over 5,000 patents that had been confiscated under national security orders, many of them dealing with energy. These are big macroeconomic issues where you have a few big powerhouses, multi-trillion-dollar consortia that are wanting to keep the status quo, and then they have the national security state or the patent office be their lackeys, their shills. And so this is a dynamic that I think has to change, and we have a plan to change that. But it's difficult because the big mistake everybody makes with these technologies, they think, oh, I'm going to build a better mousetrap, and that means that the world is going to beat a path to my door. This is what every inventor I've met thinks. The flaw in their thinking is this: before the world finds out about it, Murder Incorporated, as I call it, is going to find a path to your door. And they're going to confiscate your device, and if you don't relent, they're going to confiscate you. And you'll be in prison or you'll be killed or whatever. So you have to find a strategy around these jackbooted thug fascists. I'm very blunt about this. Let's not you can't put lipstick on this pig. That's who and what they are. And meanwhile, the earth is about to flip upside down. Literally. We're doing so much biosphere damage. And that's one of the big pressing issues of our generation. So, for example, this is one of the, an old presidential briefing document for Barack Obama. The first part of it are various government documents. And so one of my favorite ones is this National Reconnaissance Office one that leaked out that lists all the project code names. Now, when you do the briefing, you go, well, here are these. Dreamland. Here, Dreamland is literally listed on this document. It's a National Reconnaissance Office document. So, and then it has Cosmic Ops, Magi. And so people don't understand that's the Majority Intelligence Committee Ops, Cosmic Ops, Royal Ops, all of these, and all these different squadrons the Sally Corridor, Groom Lake, Dreamland, Ground Star, Blackjack Team. There's Blackjack Control is at Edwards. This is at Nellis, so-called Area 51. And it was a security lure because people were trying to get on the edge of the range and see it. But that's not important. It's the distribution list that was important. Most people don't realize that. And then we also include, some of the disclosure project documents. Well, to be honest, 99.9% of the population of the world would benefit. Way out there. The big issue is the people who would be the losers are going to be the people who are very in power. So the people who have all the power are a very small number of people who would be the losers on that. And more importantly, the centralized power system, that's going to vanish. That's going to go the way of all flesh. Not only power in terms of energy generation, but political power, macroeconomic power, all that's going to change. So it's one of these things where we'll have a whole new world, which is wonderful. But if you're someone with $1 trillion oil field, it ain't wonderful. But those are the people who have outsized amounts of power. It's not democratic. So that's the main thing, is that it's got to happen. It should have happened 100 years ago, and now it's time.
President Trump made an effort to open up files. And actually, what I understand, what he said is he wanted every federal agency to release everything they had on UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, however you want to put it. I don't think the Biden administration has the same goal. We're talking about two opposing trains of thought. I don't think we're going to see anything from the Biden administration, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that go on and the president does not have access to. If President Biden or even President Trump wanted to go to Area 51, he would have to get permission. It would probably not be denied, but he can't just get Air Force One. Well, we're going to go to Area 51 and land. There's a lot of things. The bureaucrats control the secrets within the federal government. Very possibly, depending on their political leanings, that they may be more willing to give information to a current president or a former president. But it's not the president. It is the bureaucrats that control the security and the information within black programs. Even as the president of the United States, I don't believe you're in the position to overstep some of the security protocols that are in place to protect national security. And national security is sort of thrown into everything. It's really a crap statement, because they can say everything is national security. No, it's not. I mean, the existence or the amount of money you're spending on a weapons program, well, it's classified. Why? It's our money. It's our American taxpayer money. Well, why is it classified? Well, you need to know. Yeah, I need to know where you're spending my money. But they don't have to tell you, and there isn't any mechanism for you to pull it out of them.
We are in a society that has been, regardless of what scientists and engineers tell us, we are in a society that has been basically frozen in technology for about 100 years now. Since 1908, we are still using fossil fuels for our vehicles. That has been the case since 1908. That's insane. That's absolutely crazy. And all the technology that connects with real people on the ground basically has not moved forward very much. It's only moved forward very little bits. So this is an artificial situation. This technology, the technology that came out of Roswell, has largely been held back from us. And it is getting ready to burst forward now. It is getting ready to burst forward, regardless of what the people with the Tic Tacs do, where they're withholding all this stuff and keeping it for themselves. But other areas of technology that are also from Roswell, from 1947, this stuff is getting ready to burst forward. And it's going to be an amazing society that we're going to be going into in these next year or so. It's going to be an amazing society that we're going to go into.
The government has admitted that they are in possession of vehicles not of this world, and also that they have been seeing these UAPs or these UFOs for many, many years. Now, the reason why the government is talking about these UAPs and UFOs now is because they're getting ready to fund and fuel a lot of money into the Space Force.
On December 20th, 2019, the United States took a giant leap into the next era of military defense. Recognizing the threat to U.S. national interests, a new force was established to protect our freedom to access and operate in space, the United States Space Force. With a mission to keep the space domain secure, stable, and accessible, the United States Space Force will protect U.S. and allied interests in space and provide new and current space capabilities. But this can't be done alone, nor will it be.
So before it was like deny, deny, deny. Now all of a sudden we have UAPs, which are, these are aerial vehicles that we don't know exactly what they really are, but they know what they are. I think that the UAPs are really technologies that we've developed.
This morning, a report that the government cannot explain those mysterious objects caught on video by the military. From an upside-down pyramid-like object hovering above a Navy destroyer, to cylindrical spheres disappearing into the ocean.
Splashed. Mark bearing a range.
Based off of alien vehicles that we are in possession of as admitted by them. So I think that they've been reverse engineering this technology for a very, very long time and have now perfected it to the point where when it appears in the sky, the general population thinks it might be an alien, but in actuality, it's technology developed by us. I like to call them ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles.
Now, ahead of the release of a declassified Pentagon report, the New York Times says these papers do little to clarify what the videos show. The New York Times reporting that intelligence officials are worried the videos show America's adversaries may be racing ahead of the U.S. in developing elite weapons technology.
Now, the thing behind this is that the government really needs to find another way to find money to fuel the military-industrial complex. We've gone through every single country, and we've pretty much dominated and brought democracy. And now, so what's happening is the war machine is running out. It's drying up. The money is getting dry. And when the money gets dry, you need a new reason to get the people on board to agree to allow you to use their money. And so what is it going to be? It's going to be the Space Force.
Most of the more than 120 incidents over the past 2 decades are not from the U.S. military or other advanced U.S. government technology.
Whoa, it's getting close.
The Times also reports the Pentagon has found no evidence that the phenomena are aliens.
There's a suppression of the news. The major media doesn't want to share with you the real truth of what's going on above our heads every single day. They continue to use fake UFO videos on a daily basis talking about the UAP phenomenon. It's ridiculous. We've actually caught them in a lie, showcasing what looks to be some kind of swarm of UFOs. But when you look at the footage that they show on national television, they're showing you what is a phone app, which showcases UFOs in the sky. But in fact, it's a simple app that you could download and film in the sky and make it appear that there's UFOs swarming everywhere. This goes along with the major media narrative of UFOs. They're everywhere. They're a threat and they're coming for us. But in fact, they're showing us an app that is totally false. This is absolutely ridiculous. When the true evidence is coming from the public themselves, when we receive over 1,000 videos every year right at third phase of moon, we reach out to the major media saying, hey, take a look at this. The major media refuses to accept videos from the public. They only want to use the military threat narrative and these blurry videos when the public has much, much better evidence and the major media doesn't want to show it. Such as an incredible sighting of what people were saying that looks like a space station traversing across the moon. Whatever was captured was high in the stratosphere, some kind of experimental, again, exotic form of propulsion. Once we put the video out on third phase of moon, they were forced to admit again that this indeed was some kind of secret experimental program in regards to sniffing the atmosphere. Whatever it was, again, more videos exposing high exotic craft.
Well, I've actually had a lot of meetings with people who are initially very supportive, and then they get a visit, and they either are threatened or they're afraid, they realize what the ramifications are, and they back off. So this is why we sort of gave up on the political and the moneyed people and did it as a grassroots disclosure effort back many years ago. So that's the big problem, is how are you going to get this out? If you want to benefit the whole planet and the whole population of the planet, you can't be thinking you're going to do this through politicians who are innately going to be bought off or threatened. Because those are people who, this is what they do. They put their finger in the air and say, which way is the wind blowing? And that's the way they're going to go. So, and the public is going to have to decide if they want to do this themselves. This is why we took the whole disclosure project public. So that's what we're doing. I mean, what most people, they think that the U.S. government builds stuff. They contract. It's called WFO, work for others. And in 1993, I was at the Wrigley Mansion in Phoenix, and Jordy Hormel, the Hormel meat family, had bought it. There was a covert group that had kind of taken over his operation. And I was there, and they wanted me to come to a meeting very late at night. And we're sitting around this big conference table at midnight with a bunch of suits. And this is in 1993, a couple months before I briefed the CIA director. And there was a man there. He says, look, if you want to deal with this issue of these technologies, UFO issue, you don't need to talk to the president, the CIA director. They don't know anything, and they're not going to know anything. You should be talking to people like us. We're the ones who are running the WFO. We'll work for other, it's called, programs. And we're tied into certain, I'm quoting, orders of Jesuit priests that are working on the technology transfer. We have the supercomputers that back up the banking system, and where we can get a lot of money just from transactions where they're odd amounts. We're the one, and he went through this whole litany. And he started explaining this to me because he was basically trying to wave me off from going forward with this meeting with the director of the CIA. And it was when I realized that, sort of the people who think that the government's running everything, and there's this top-down president, commander-in-chief, etc. But that system got decapitated in the 50s, mid to late 50s, which is what Eisenhower warned about when he left office, when he said we're the military-industrial complex. So what took its place? Well, what took its place was this sort of hybrid entity, partially covert, unacknowledged government programs, but a big part of that is then outsourced to big corporations, covert contractors, and other organizations. So that's kind of what developed in the post-World War II era, and it's how the operation runs.
So if someone was actually to go against the government and try to attempt to release this to the world, personally, I don't think it could be done because they don't put all their eggs in one basket. They don't follow the policy of single point failure. They have multiple repositories where they keep all of this stuff. Absolutely, Los Alamos, Oak Ridge National Labs, MacDill Air Force Base, Edwards Air Force Base, the remote test site in Nevada, also known as Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3. That's the actual terminology for Groom Lake facility. So for someone to try to bust down the walls.
These were the folks who finally tried it, a few dozen running toward an entrance of Area 51, the secretive military.
It's not going to happen. You'd have to go to all these facilities, get into their vaults, then bring that out as a united coalition. Not one person couldn't do it. It would take a united coalition of acknowledged scientists to come forward with it. That's how it would happen.
How long will something stay classified? When will we see it? And when we do see something, how old is it? Typically, if the federal government, the bureaucrats, the spooks, the guys that handle and work in the classified environment, if they're going to release something, it's probably was built, flown, operated, and tested 20 years ago. So any new technology you see that the federal government is releasing, as far as maybe the B-21 radar or anything else, that's old technology. Holding and being responsible for security is a very, very powerful feeling. So if you're a security administrator and it's your job to maintain the security, you're in a real powerful position, because you can destroy someone's career. They'll only release it if it's to their advantage. Other than that, I don't think the American public or the public in general is going to have any idea what we're up to, what the government's up to.
So the truth is, even Rumsfeld admitted the day before 9/11, there's 2.3 trillion with a T dollars unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. Probably now it's 8 or 10 trillion. Those go into these unacknowledged projects. They're deep black. The Congress has no idea where it's going. The president has no idea where it's going. So, the real issue is, it's sort of a complete corrupt, unconstitutional ripoff. And, but nobody wants to take on that system because they're lethal, vicious people. So, and the truth of the matter is, if you do someone who, let's say you have a senior Department of Justice person to investigate this, they won't be told anything. They'll be told basically get lost. So by the definition, these projects are illegal and unconstitutional, and so they don't care about a subpoena, and they don't care about the chain of command. They don't care about the Constitution. They'll just say, buzz off. We're not going to tell you anything. So that's actually how it runs. I mean, people have to totally redo their civics lesson that they learned in high school. Is not how this country runs anymore, and not since the late 50s. My opinion.
So before, when money would go black budget and people would go, well, where's these trillions and trillions of dollars going, and they had no answer, now they can say, look, there's these UAPs that are harassing our marine ships and they're peering over our nuclear installments. And so they're a threat to national security. They're a threat to global security. We need your money so that we can build space tech. We need spaceships. We need weapons in space. We need different types of weaponized satellites. And so now all of a sudden they found a new way to garner the support of the people of the world by building this space threat.
Since 1917, the Air Force Research Laboratory has been leading the discovery, development, and delivery of warfighting technologies for our air, space, and cyberspace forces. Already on board, AFRL is continuing to provide the technology and resources necessary to help the United States Space Force build a comprehensive military advantage in space.
And so by building the space threat concept into mind, that fear, of course, we're going to say, take our money, apply all these trillions towards this defense. Don't worry about schooling and education. Don't worry about health care. Don't worry about retirement money. We need to protect our planet against alien invasion. And so that's what the drive is behind it. The mainstream media like CNN and Fox are showing these very strange, obscure, obfuscated images, very fuzzy radar images of UFOs with kind of, very staticky accounts from military personnel. And so what they're doing is they're dropping seeds. They're dropping seeds on the general population, getting them to believe that they're real, believe that they actually exist now, because they want to get that money out of us. They want to fund a space force. And so what they want to do is they want to keep it very obscure to where you can't fully exactly really see what it is, because they have something that they want you to see when they finally make that big push, potentially, in my theory, personally, this is my own theory, that they will, do it like another Gulf of Tonkin incident where they faked an attack to go into the Vietnamese War, things like that. I think that there's this potential fake attack that's going to come, and and then and only then will you see a very clear image, and it'll be probably something that we developed ourselves, probably along the lines of a false flag where, they claim it's an alien attack, but it probably isn't really aliens. And the reason why I think this is because you look at the accounts of aliens over the millennia.
And if you look closely at the top left and right corners, you can see that objects, they appear to be some sort of flying crafts. The ships are dome-like with 3 trails coming out of the bottom, and UFO enthusiasts insist this is proof that flying saucers were present during the death of Jesus.
You go into ancient tablets, text, scripture, cylinder scrolls, and again now into the modern idiom where you have people seeing them on cell phones, recording them with HD cameras.
Va demasiado rápido, loco, no lo sé. Está yendo rapidazo, loco.
And we have the better copy, better quality imagery of them. We can see them, even in places people have seen them with their own naked eye.
Is it going down or is it going? It looks like a spaceship.
What happens here is they don't want you to know that these beings have never threatened us. So far, I mean, as far as we know, in modern times, they haven't tried to eradicate us. They haven't tried to destroy us. They haven't come guns blazing to destroy our cities and kill the people. And so I really believe that they want to paint a different picture about these beings, a picture that they can control the image in our minds so that they can control the support, the fear, and also the money.
When it gets right in front of me, it just disappears.
Disappears.
Disappears. Like gone.
To be clear, he's referring to this giant object as a tic tac because he said it was shaped like one. Now, 3 other crew members with that pilot saw the same thing. Are these objects a national security concern?
Jeremy Corbell launched a video that made the media excited. A UFO, triangular-shaped craft that were captured off the coast of California by a Navy sailorman that wants to remain anonymous. From closer inspection by a debunker named Mick West, who did his own little mock-up, which he created the same effect that was captured by this Navy sailor.
This UFO video does not show a pyramid. There's a triangle shape, but that looks exactly like an effect caused by a bright light being out of focus and a night vision camera with a triangular iris, like this one.
What we're seeing is a result of a bokeh lens. If you look inside the iris, it has a triangular trifecta shape. Anything projected off in the distance of the camera that would seem blurry would mimic the effect of a trifecta. This is what we're looking at. You notice the FAA lights blinking on the objects itself, and people are claiming these are pyramidal shapes that are flying in the sky, where in fact all it is a distortion of the lens known as a bokeh effect. UFOs reported by FAA pilots have come in. We received audio from a ham radio operator who was able to intercept the American Airlines pilot. Actually explains to the tower control that something fast was in close proximity to the commercial airliner. He says it looks like a cruise missile.
We just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object.
We obtained the audio from Jim Goodall and then shared it across the media platform. They refused to touch it. They thought it was a hoax. And then until 5 days later, they reveal it to the world. This is how the major media operates. They don't want to share you the truth, and when they got it, they suppress it. Very interesting indeed when they're pushing off CGI and late news when the news is already there.
It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing, moving really fast.
The close encounter happened early Sunday afternoon while the American Airlines flight was passing over New Mexico en route to Arizona.
Have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us.
The radio call was noticed by an airline radio enthusiast who says the call caught his attention because the pilot sounded very excited.
After the American Airlines reported the UFO in close proximity to the commercial airliner, we received paperwork the day after, leaked document from Southwest Airlines of what appears to be a notification to everybody and all pilots to report anything unusual that was happening in the sky. Later, we received confirmation from the military that indeed there was some kind of secret military testing going on. What are they experimenting on? Is it the Tic Tac or some high exotic form of meta-propulsion? Why is a major media picking up on these UFO videos that seem controversial? We have the Go Fast, the gimbal, the Tic Tac, which really doesn't give us much evidence of anything. All we're seeing is blurry images. Louis Elizondo says that This is basically the bottom of the barrel that the Pentagon has released. What's up with that? Why haven't they give us, the people, full disclosure of these videos? Pilot Fravor claims that he was within 50 feet of the Tic Tac itself, and insiders from the Pentagon also claim that they do have video of this event. This would basically blow the lid on everything if we could get crystal clear detail and the full effect from beginning and end of these so-called UFO videos. It seems like the major media and the Pentagon Congress seem to be tied in coordination with this disinformation effort to keep the UFO secrecy deep behind the shadows. There's above top secret access to the hidden technology behind disclosure. Is the world ready for it?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people are confused about how something like this could be structured, and they're always talking about, well, you know, what about China versus this country or Great Britain? It has nothing to do with that. So we think in terms of our high school civics lessons, where there's the U.S., Canada. We're looking at geopolitical boundaries on the globe of the Earth. The group that runs these classified projects has been for decades, at least since the 60s, transnational, meaning that they've had operatives in projects in Brazil or China or the old Soviet Union. And at that level of unacknowledged special access projects, many of them work together. So when people say, well, you know, is it just a U.S. and U.K. or Five Eyes being the, you know, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United States, Great Britain, spy, satellite, and intelligence gathering and sharing consortium? I said, no, it isn't. It depends on the country and what assets they want to have and who they have on the ground who can actually be functional. For example, that CIA document talking about going to Argentina and Brazil conducting fake alien abductions, that meant that the agency, the CIA, had to have assets to cooperate with that in those countries, right? So I think that people have to kind of forget their high school civics lessons, and rethink what the geopolitical realities are when you're dealing with something at this scale.
But governments can't die. So we need to find other incentives for bureaucracy to adapt and improve. The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector. But not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Well, you don't just have $2, $3, $10 trillion vanish. There's a whole system in place, and it comes from many different budgets. And then a big part of the funding comes from private endeavors. So let's say you spin off a technology, such as the stuff we're using that we're calling high tech. Well, a lot of it was spun off, as Colonel Corso described, from R&D on some of the ET reverse engineering, extraterrestrial devices. But the companies that are allowed to have those and hand off to have people embedded in them who are part of this consortium. And therefore you can develop a $1 trillion company or a multi-$100 billion computer chip company or whatever, and some of that money also can feed into it. So it isn't just government, it's private and government together. So I call this a hybrid entity that's neither strictly government nor strictly private. And interestingly, from a secrecy point of view, as a private entity, corporate or citizen, penetrate these projects, it's top secret national security. Most of the work being done on this are private corporations, Northrop, Raytheon, the old E-Systems, EG&G, and they'll say, well, it's proprietary. You see? So if you come from the government, it's proprietary. If you come from corporate or civilian, it's top secret government. So they kind of wall it off. They play that game.
Releasing the information, not releasing the information on things that they've been flying, chasing our airplanes or submarines or naval ships and whatever. They're going to release the information on this stuff if it's to their advantage. As long as there's no advantage of releasing to the public, then they're going to keep it. They're going to keep it covered up.
people need to wake up to that fact. Wake up to the fact that we have this psychological operation, that now we have government officials that are part of this, that are working in black parts of the Pentagon. Black meaning unaccountable, unlimited funding, and don't have to answer to anyone.
A government source says there were no glitches, and the veteran Navy pilots are very credible.
As it gets in front of me, it just goes poof and it's gone. It's gone like that fast.
Carl Sagan said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if the crash retrievals are true that we've heard for so long now, where's the physical evidence? It's got to be within government labs, different facilities, universities. It sounds great on paper, but we need that physical evidence. Barring that physical evidence, we're not going to move this field forward. And if the crash retrievals are true, then all bets are off. If those stories are true, then they do have the debris, they do have the saucers, they do have the bodies, and they've been working on this for 60, 70, perhaps 80 years.
So whatever you can think of, whatever you can imagine as a technology or a possibility, whatever you can think of, it's already been done. It's not even a question anymore. And I'm talking about everything. Portal technology, teleportation, faster than light travel, FTL. All these things are now possible and pure reality.
It just turns abruptly and starts mirroring me. So as I'm coming down, it starts coming up.
So it's mimicking your moves.
Yeah, it was aware we were there.
And I really do believe that these ARBs, I call them, or they call them UAPs, that have been buzzing our military ships out there, our marine ships in the ocean and so forth, and coming by bases, are made by us. I believe that they know exactly, who made them. We made them. I think that they are alien reproduction vehicles that they've taken reverse engineered technology from previous down UFOs and basically put them together, created our own technologies that we have now are flying around in. They've already declassified the stealth bomber and all these other craft during the 9/11. This is the stuff that's behind the scenes for the next level of war. And these craft most likely can fly in the atmosphere and also probably go into outer atmosphere as well. And so I believe that they are actually ours, and they're painting the picture as if they're not ours, but I really do believe that they're made by private corporations in America or somewhere on this planet. And the reason why they use private corporations is because if you use a government organization, then we can do a Freedom of Information Act and we can find out what's going on. But when you go into a private corporation and you subcontract it out, then the private corporation doesn't have to disclose any information to the general public at all.
So these are some of the tapes from Asilomar, the 1995 gathering of the original whistleblowers and Disclosure Project witnesses. But at that time, if you look at it, it says Starlight, Project Starlight. So if you look at the documents from the Clinton library where the Associated Press sued the Clinton administration to get them, it was the project, it was just called the Starlight Coalition. And there's a letter that we wrote, all of us gathered there, including some friends of the president who were there, recommending that he declassify the subject, disclose the UFO issue, etc. So this was about a year and a half after I briefed R. James Woolsey, the CIA director for President Clinton. So by then, we decided, let's get together a number and try to find some new people. So we had Marina Popovich from the old Soviet Union, who was a cosmonaut, who had a sighting. Her husband, Pavel Popovich, would be like our Neil Armstrong. We had, of course, Edgar Mitchell was there as my guest. It was one of his early meetings for this. And then we had some people who had handled the Roswell materials, a whole bunch of different people. And it was called, Project Starlight back then. Because at that time, it was still a kind of unofficial civilian effort to get the president. And then later, after this, in 97, the Congress to take the leadership on this. So we wouldn't have to do it. But they wouldn't. So we ended up doing the Disclosure Project 2001. I want to emphasize that all of these witnesses each could speak for probably anywhere from 2 to 5 hours about what they have witnessed. We were trying to give you a snapshot. We have another 400 of these witnesses. I have carried this burden for 8 years. I'm now giving it to you, the American people and the people of the world, to take it forward. But this was the very first gathering of these Disclosure Project witnesses, military, CIA, and those tapes were stolen from me by the man I trusted to film. The people who did the filming colluded with a Clinton administration guy who was sort of a operative to take all those films and recordings and not give them to us. And so they vanished for 26 years. I get a letter a couple weeks ago, and the entire collection was buried in the backyard in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, by this Clinton guy who called my friend up and said, look, I'm getting older, and he was starting to have some maybe Alzheimer's, I'm not sure. And so he says, I have these, I'm going to send them to you. So then all of a sudden, this guy says, look, I think Dr. Greer would want to have these. So he writes me this letter, and he says, I have all the Asilomar tapes from 1995. So we just received those, and we're digitizing them, trying to get them on hard drives from the old big boxy VHS tapes. But a lot of people don't know that history of how it went from the CE5 contact and the event that happened in Florida in 92 to the intelligence community finding about what we were doing, and others, the friendlies and the people who were like on the white hats and the black hats. And they came wanting to, influence and stop what we were doing with CE5 contact, the bad actors. But there were others who were friendly. So that's how the whole Disclosure Project evolved, was out of the CE5 contact that happened, because they knew it was real. I mean, it's the thing that people tease me the most about, but it's actually the foundation of the entire Disclosure Project. Let's go. We can go out to where we've done CE5 out in the meadow down here. It's great to be able to go anywhere. When we're doing CE5 in really remote areas, sometimes you get into situations where you want to be really out, where there's not going to be a lot of interference from humans. So I tend to prefer really remote sites if I can get there. Some years ago, I was invited to go to an underground research facility in El Paso on the Mexican-American border. And it's a long story how this all got set up, but I was invited to come there because they were very supportive of what I was doing, and they had gotten permission. And this was a place where they were doing these sort of technologies that are transdimensional, but medical applications. Major stuff. I mean, as a doctor, they knew I'd be interested because I was dealing with transdimensional interstellar technology. When I'm at the airport, I'm going to transfer to Houston, and there's this guy following me around with a long beard and everything. And I go, who is this? A spook or something? It turned out it was Billy F. Gibbons of ZZ Top. He somehow knew one of the scientists in this lab. How, I can't remember. And he says, well, hey, doc, I know you're going to this meeting. Can I come? I said, well, if it's okay with them, it's okay with me. I'm their guest. He says, yeah, it's okay. He says, well, if you'll let me come, I got a seat for you in first class. It was really funny. I said, okay, that's good. So let's do it. So we go there, and we go into this office, and then we go underground. And they have technologies that literally, electromagnetic transdimensional technologies, where they can, if someone had a missing limb, they can attach to the subtle body, the mystics call astral body, but that energy, like you have phantom pain, and regrow it. If someone had a severed spinal column, which I've seen too much of, a 16-year-old boy is diving into a pool and, boom, paralyzed from the neck down. That was all stuff that they could repair, but the technology, here's the issue. The same technology that gives you that would give you free energy to run your house, because it's in that same, let's call it constellation of extraordinary technologies that they would want to keep secret. So there are a lot of spin-offs beyond energy, propulsion, and the environment that will benefit humanity once we can get the first level of this out. Because it's unbelievable how backward even our medical technology is compared to what's possible. So that's also a very bit of good news from the point of view of medical healing technologies, really advanced technologies. This is why I've called for sort of a Marshall Plan for the planet for new energy and the environment that is supported and funded by individuals in an open source way, and not expecting, I think it's silly to expect the government of the United States or any other government to get behind doing something that brings out the most disruptive technologies in the history of the human race. Let's be blunt. I mean, everyone thinks that Silicon Valley is disruptive. There's nothing disruptive about stuff that's come out of Silicon Valley. It's all peripheral around the edges. This really is, frankly, disruptive, but it also creates a new civilization, and it saves our future. So if this had been introduced slowly from the early 20th century, 100 years ago, to now, we'd be okay. But now we've run out of time because of what's happening to the biosphere, geopolitically, population boom. So in order to create enough change quickly enough, we're going to have to do something very different, very fundamentally different than what we've been doing.
Will this day of disclosure come? Personally, I don't see it coming on the near horizon. And the way I look at it, and I know a lot of people don't like to talk about this, but hey, let's roll with it. Every day that goes by, every day that we live, every minute that goes by, Philip Klass's curse comes more true every day.
There's no more exciting story that I could write, or indeed we could publish, than to say, at last, we've come across one UFO report that cannot be explained in prosaic terms.
And so his curse was, you will not know anything more about UFOs today than you will on your deathbed. And when on your deathbed, you won't know anything more about UFOs on your deathbed either. So that's becoming true. If we don't take the bulls by the horn and make a management decision within this whole field of ufology, all of us are going to keep on tricking down that timeline. We'll all pass away, and we won't know the truth. That's why we got to get drastic with this and take the bulls by the horn and roll with it.
We just want to know what in the hell those things that are up in the air. There's something out there, and I think we as allegedly free people, we need to have the ability to find out the truth. And the truth is not going to come from the federal government. The truth is not going to come from established journalism. The truth is going to come from individuals going out and say, screw this, I'm going to find out what it is. I'm going to go camp out in the desert. I'm going to get a good camera. I'm going to shoot something, not with a gun, with a camera. And maybe be able to open up the can of worms and find out what's true and what's bullshit.
I really believe that there's definitely a script being written for these reporters and these anchor men and women to continue to regurgitate the same information over and over again. No matter what channel you turn it to, it's always now UAP, threat to security, over our nuclear bases. When you look at the real historical information based on what these UFOs have done in the past, the real UFOs, they have come to military bases. And what have they done? They deactivated the nukes. They didn't activate them and launch them.
And either way, these things are being witnessed by some of our best fighter pilots. They're being picked up on electro-optical devices such as gun camera footage, and then it's furthermore being substantiated by radar data. So we know they're real, whatever it is.
And so, if you're an advanced civilization and you're a million years ahead of a planet like us, and you're flying by and you detect technology with your sensors array, and you go, oh, let me take a look over here real quick, and all of a sudden you take a quick look at the planet, you go, wow, they've got a defense system on this planet. And then you scan the defense system and you realize that the defense system is not aimed into space to guard against an outside threat. It's aimed to point back at itself. They can scan the missile trajectories. They have this technology. They can see that they're all pointed back at the Earth itself. And so they're thinking, these people aren't that intelligent. I mean, they've got bombs pointed at themselves. And so, to show, hey, we need this planet for the future. This is a great planet. It's got a lot of abundant life. It's very abundant. This is a great outpost in the galaxy. we're not going to let you guys destroy this planet. So we're going to just deactivate these nukes and show you our true power. So instead of saying on the news, hey, they came to our base and they deactivated the nukes and they're trying to tell us, don't destroy ourselves, they say, no, they came to our bases and it's a threat to our national security. They accessed our nuclear devices. You see how they just put a spin on it to change how you feel on the inside about what these beings are doing.
Well, I think a lot of the problem that's happened in the last 30, 40, 50 years, actually, is it's very easy to distract people with digital, social media, entertainment, that sort of thing. That's the modern bread and circus. And so people aren't focused on either the gravity of the problem, frankly, which is more severe than people realize, or, in my opinion, the real solutions. Think about it. 1955 was the dawn of the Eisenhower interstate system. And that's 66 years ago. We already had anti-grav, so-called, or electrogravitic propulsion in October of 54, mastered. Before that, decades before that, we had Tesla-type zero-point energy, what he called the infinite energy field. So what are we doing here? We're talking 2/3 of a century to a century where this could happen. Now, I think in terms of natural evolution of the planet, let's take a big step back. There probably would have been an industrial era for 50 to 70 years in the 1800s, where we would have been using these things where you dig coal up or pull oil out of the ground and burn it. And then there should have been this revolution in electromagnetic field propulsion and energy and all these things. But the big industrialists in the late 1800s, early 1900s are, the same consciousness of greed, and quite frankly, stupid greed, that ruled the roost then is what's ruling the roost in 2021. So I think the people are going to have to unite and say, we've had enough of this. But for them to reach that conclusion, they have to get educated on the fact that these technologies are real, that the UFO is real, that we figured out how they fly, that they are not burning rocket fuel or Jet A fuel from Exxon to fly around like you see them in these videos. They're using a totally different technology, which has been figured out. For example, I think Nova or PBS did a story about how during the peace movement, they did a FOIA request, and it turned out, like in New York City, if people were protesting the Vietnam War and they were organizing, there would be like 16 people at a meeting, and 12 of them were on the payroll of the New York City intelligence unit or the FBI or somebody. So, and they all look like hippies, talk like hippies. So what you find is when you're dealing with the UFO subject, which is the biggest secret in the history of the United States. Remember the Wilbur Smith top secret document from Canada from 1950. It states explicitly that this issue is the biggest secret in the history of the United States, exceeding the secrecy of the development of the hydrogen bomb. And this was a year or two before we detonated the first hydrogen bomb. So when you look at that, you realize what kind of assets would be deployed to capture a movement trying to disclose the subject, trying to make contact. And so that's what you see. I mean, I always tell people, you see the dog and pony shows going on in the mainstream media, that's called capture. And the intelligence community will then infiltrate and capture a movement. And they've done that to the meditation movements. They've done it to the environmental movements. They've done it to the peace movements. Because it's very easy to do. It's all undercover operatives. Nobody would ever guess that's who they are. So I learned about that the hard way in the 90s, where we had people who became embedded in my project that ended up being operatives. And so we'd have to remove them. It's like when I was at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch in Wyoming, the JY ranch there in the Tetons. And he said, Dr. Greer, the disclosure of this and these technologies, the implications are so vast and so profound that no aspect of life on Earth will be unaffected by it. I said, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's secret. It's not secret because it's trivial. They haven't killed people and subverted the democratic institutions of the United States and Canada and Europe for nothing. It's because it is so profound. The implications are so vast that every aspect of life on Earth will be changed. So for people who are defending hundreds of trillions of dollars in industrial commodity, oil, et cetera, and so forth, assets, they'll do a lot. I think this is why I've always been very cautious since I'm being burned rather badly back in the early to mid 90s. Remember the Asilomar tapes that I showed earlier? That was a complete betrayal of my trust by a couple of people who were embedded in the operation, who are actually I found out later, were working for somebody else. But I didn't know who they were, and you're not going to be able to do a search on them or even a private eye. It's not going to pop up. These are black projects. So this is why you have to be very, very careful. And when you're dealing with something as important as the fact that we're not alone in the universe, but also the technologies that get them here and back have been figured out, but would completely alter the way this planet operates and the people who benefit from the system. I mean, the average Joe Blow driving his pickup truck who's a carpenter isn't benefiting from ExxonMobil, right? I mean, he has to pay, whatever, $4 a gallon for gas and all that kind of, and the maintenance. If you had these other systems, there'd be no energy cost. So the average person, that's why I said yesterday, 99.99999% of the world's population wants to have disclosure, even if they don't know about it. They want these technologies, even though they've never heard of them. But that's the problem. This is why we have to get the message out. That's why keep doing documentaries and educational things, because you have to raise awareness first, and then from there you can actually make change happen. This is kind of fun. My whole thing is that I realized that, there was a 1991, I met with a man who said, if you're going to do what you're going to do, you have to have millions of people who know who you are and support, because otherwise you're, quote, a dead man walking. And then he told me what I need to do about a dead man trigger. So even by the early 90s, I mean, obviously I was asked to brief the director of the CIA in 93. We had an amazing collection of stuff. A lot of that is in storage places all over the world with people holding them. That if something happens to me, it comes out. But we didn't really stand that system up quickly enough. So between 93 and 98, several people on my team died under strange conditions. And I had some serious threats, and there's been ongoing problems. But I think that around 1997, 98, there were some people who came to me who have worked this issue for a long time, 40, 50 years, who are on our side of the argument, of the advocacy to bring this out, who said, look, do you want protection from these sort of elements? I said, yes. So we have that now. So since 98, no one on my team has been threatened or hurt. So we try to put people under that umbrella. This is one of the cautionary tale. When Stan Meyer's collection of technologies were acquired by this other entity, and I didn't know exactly who they were at the time. It was not an open situation. They were known only as an engineering group in Michigan. And I said to the heirs of Stan Meyer's technologies that whoever gets it, tell them they have to do it open source in front of the whole world. The whole world's going to be watching this technology being refined, developed, released, without any intellectual property holdback, without patent. Because otherwise, they're not going to survive their launch. They'll blow up on the launch pad. And that's what happened. And I got this call from Lord, I won't say his last name, in Great Britain, who had ended up being the money behind that acquisition, which is how they were able to outbid my group to get it. And he says, these people are running for their lives. They've gotten the systems running, and these would change the world. But they are looking for an eco-friendly country that they can get to because they're being threatened in America. I said, you'd have to go to another star system. There's no place on this planet where the henchmen of these kind of Fourth Reich fascists won't find you. And so he said, well, what do I do? So I wrote a 2 or 3 page memo to this guy, Lord so-and-so, which I can share with you. That's a whole strategic plan of what they need to do within a few hours to survive and not be assassinated and not have the technology confiscated. They wouldn't do it. They were still like, it's like Lord of the Rings. My precious, holding on to the ring. Ironically, in this case, it wasn't a ring. It was a toroid, donut-shaped energy. And they didn't want to let go of the greed and profit motive. They wanted to be the next Rockefellers of energy, you see. So that is the Achilles heel for people. They see dollar signs, they see power, they see money. So they make all the strategic errors. So I wrote out a strategic plan of what they could do to save their lives and save the technology and get it out to the world. Because you're talking about the ability to stand up in an industrial energy infrastructure to replace everything our entire planet uses. You need 1,000 companies that are trillion-dollar companies to do it in enough time to save the biosphere. So I said, this shouldn't be about money or power. It should be about purpose. And you'll do very well by doing good. But they wouldn't listen. Next thing I know, I meet with a guy in Orange County, California, who knew one of the people who was with that engineering team. And the man said this guy came in, was crying like a baby because every single one of them had been killed and the technology vanished, as we predicted. And see, this is what's frustrating, is that for 30 years, I keep running across this opportunity. People keep making the same predictable errors. You're dealing with something that's making a frontal run at the most powerful interest in the world, on the planet, bar none, period. And you cannot have a strategic plan that doesn't account for that. But that's what everyone, so it's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So I spent a number of years trying to work with people like that to satisfy their materialistic view and intellectual property view, and realized it was never going to happen because they kept vanishing or being threatened. Or next thing you know, they're rich, driving a Lamborghini and wearing $5,000 suits. But the technology's gone into the black pit of Calcutta. It's gone. So after, about 25 years of that, I said, no more. There's a certain way this had got to happen. We know how it can happen. And if people would follow that strategic plan, you'd have a chance of surviving. It's still a heavy lift because you have massive, powerful interests that do not want these technologies out. And that's why the people who dealt with the UFO-related technologies and classified projects, they're terrified to be identified. I have a lot of them on my team who've actually worked on them, built them. But, they know the kinds of enforcement that's been used to keep this secret. One of the things that was surprising to me is in 1997 when I was briefing one of the 5 directors of NASA, Dr. Nancy Maynard, and her boyfriend was Dr. Bob Carell, who was Deputy Director of National Science Foundation. So I first met with him in D.C. My science advisor set up the meeting at the National Science Foundation headquarters, and they were both in charge of, for the National Science Foundation, and Dr. Maynard, she was in charge of the mission to planet Earth, doing the satellite imaging on climate change. So they were both climate change scientists. And they reached out to me, and I went through the technologies, how they operate, how there needs to be institutional support to fund and bring out these technologies so that we can get completely off all these environmentally damaging technologies, including nuclear. And they were very interested, but then when I said, now will you help me do this? Because I'm a doctor, I don't have the resources. I'm working full-time as an emergency doctor, trying to support a family of 6. I said, I'm not a billionaire, I can't fund something like this, but the National Science Foundation can, and NASA can. And they both said, we want to know about this, but if we do it, it'll be the end of our careers. Now think about this, their lives dedicate, PhDs, to fixing this problem. The solution is put on a silver platter by my team. And they go, well, the fate of the planet here My careerism here, they chose their career. Take that experience, multiply it 1,000 times at least. In 30 years of me doing this, that's why the world is in the state it's in. Because people are putting their own selfish interests, their own fears ahead of the planet we're leaving our children and grandchildren. So I think it's a very serious issue. And people think,